Well, you ready to go?
Yeah.
Hey, well, kia ora, good afternoon, everybody. Look, it's an absolute privilege to be here at Messines today. This is a place where New Zealand lost a huge loss of life. In fact, we lost more people here, soldiers here, than we did in Gallipoli, and we had 2,700 soldiers killed in a matter of days, fighting battles in Passandale, Messines, and Ypres as well. And so it's quite significant to be here representing New Zealand at this place. Right behind me is actually where my great-grandfather was, and so he was involved in this battle here at Messines as well. So it's been lovely hearing some of the stories about him and his brigade as well, the New Zealand Rifle Brigade. So really special to be here. Very good reminder of the sacrifice that New Zealanders have made over 110 years in the defence of our values, and we continue to do so here in 2025 as well. With that, I can take your questions.
Yeah, what can you tell us about your great-grandfather? What do you know about his story?
Yeah, that's pretty special. I was just the weekend before last, I was actually in Albury in South Canterbury, and that's where he was from. He was from a farming family, like so many in New Zealand. He was a 21-year-old that came off. He'd never been outside of really South Canterbury. And I've just been reading some of his letters as I've been on this trip over the last day, and writing back home, he'd seen things he'd never seen before as he came on a big boat from Wellington out to Western Australia into Egypt, and then ultimately here to Belgium and then France. He got sick and was hospitalised back to the UK, and then it was just an incredible experience. And so pretty special to be sort of in Albury, South Canterbury, just 10 days ago. At a monument not dissimilar to what we have here, acknowledging the young men that have been sent off to war from a very small farming town where it had huge impact. And when you think about it, 100,000 New Zealanders, at a time when we had a population of 1 million people, 18,000 killed, tens of thousands injured, of all the Commonwealth countries, we had a disproportionate impact of New Zealand, World War I, and the casualties and the injuries that happened. So, it's something that I think is really important that we acknowledge that service from all New Zealanders, and every New Zealander has a connection of a relative, that was here representing New Zealand. It's pretty amazing.
Did you spend that time in South Canterbury knowing that you'd be here?
Yes, I did. I was actually on a family history tour through there for a day and a half with my dad and my two brothers, and my great-grandfather was part of the family. We were on a boys' trip, and we wanted to do some family history through Southburn and through Albury and through Pleasant Point, just out of Timaru.
And that fighting wasn't, in New Zealand, that's we have Anzac Day for most New Zealanders, that's when they remember, but a lot don't have the opportunity, the privilege to come here and see sites like that, like such a large area that New Zealand had to come towards with Germany looking down on them.
Yes.
Obviously now in such a time of conflict in the world again, like what do you want New Zealanders to take from our past sacrifice? And to come over here, we didn't even know this place. For some young New Zealanders, it's quite something.
Well, we went to a place, didn't we, just earlier, we had 12,000 graves there and 34,000, unknown soldiers that were listed there, many of them New Zealanders. I think over 1,200 New Zealanders there. And I think that's right, and I think it's just a good reminder of, again, this is a country that we should be incredibly proud of the contribution we've made at different times through history, that we have a set of values, as I said yesterday, that we stand up for, and that we have actually, people have come and died for. And so, the perverse thing is here we sit 110 years on, and we're in a trench warfare in the Ukraine, albeit with drones, and the incredible tragedy of war and the futility of it in some ways.
And what was your great-grandfather's name?
Charles Watson Smith.
Right. And how old was he when he came here?
He came here when he was about 21 years old. He was a carpenter, and he originally drove for the Transport Division of the the Rifle Brigade, and then obviously was part of the Rifle Brigade here that was launched the attack here on this hill here. So so it's really special. I got to spend a bit of time with him. He lived a long time, and I probably knew him in the first 14 years of my life, knew him well, and he didn't talk about it too much, but I obviously read his letters and was very interested and got some of his buttons off his tunics and stuff like that he gave me at different times when I go visit with him. So just special. And I don't think my story is any different, and you're seeing it in New Zealand. When I was in Gallipoli this year, we had the most number of New Zealanders ever show up at a Gallipoli, and they were young school kids, they were backpackers as you'd expect through Western Europe, but they were retirees on travel tours as well, a real diversity of New Zealanders who all want to recognise and acknowledge that commitment that their forebears did and made. So it's really special, really special.
Did he write in the letters about what happened here?
It was interesting. He didn't write about the battles per se. He was writing to his mother, and he was often wondering why he wasn't getting enough letters, and then cake would arrive, and then but he about that mum in the newspapers back at home. So I think he was more interested in what was happening back at home. Was the harvest good? Was the wheat, had it come along well? Was the younger sister getting married? It was all sorts of just, I think it was probably, he didn't talk about the battles as much in the letters, but he talked about the things that he was seeing, and the food that he was eating, and the people that he got to meet with, and a Belgian and a French farmer, and how they were actually reminded him of being at home, even though things were a bit different in the food. And you can imagine it, right? I mean, you've come from South Canterbury, you've lived your whole life there, you're a carpenter, and everyone you know, and you've got 11 siblings, and you end up in a place like this. It's incredible, for him experience. So it was more about the observation of what he was seeing, and the experiences, and connecting with back at home, and probably shielding his family, I suspect, from the horrors of the war, which, as we've seen today at Passandale, Epis and here in Messines, is pretty profound.
So for New Zealanders, their Prime Minister, the leaders over here on this side of the world, New Zealanders this year just waking up to more and more news of new conflict, obviously now with the US invading Iran with the strikes. What should New Zealanders be, can they see you being over here as useful for us to be strengthening those ties? Is there some comfort they should take from that when they might be feeling really unstable?
Yeah, look, I just say, we are a long way away from that theatre of conflict in the Middle East. As I've been saying for a number of weeks now, we want to see a peaceful, stable, secure Middle East. It's in all of our interests. It's all in the world's interest, frankly. We do not want to see a nuclear-armed Iran. But now there is an opportunity, as we look forward from these strikes, to actually, get around and use diplomacy and dialogue and negotiation to actually get a political solution in place. More military action doesn't solve the problems in the Middle East. What will solve the problems is a political solution that requires dialogue and diplomacy. So, that's what we really are calling for. We're here this week. There'll be a lot of conversation, obviously, about the Middle East, but there'll also be a lot of conversation about Ukraine as well. And as I've said, we're a country that respects the sovereign nation states and sovereignty and borders of sovereignty. We also are a country that really upholds international rules-based system and international law. What we've seen with an illegal invasion by Russia in a war that's caused huge suffering for people is something that we stand with Ukraine with as well. And so we may be a long, long way away from these conflicts, but it's important, if you've got values, that actually you stand up for them, you articulate them, and where you can, you put support to them.
Were you disappointed to see that Trump had made the decision to strike Iran?
Well, it's ultimately a decision. We weren't informed about that as the Prime Minister outlined yesterday. But really, it's about the future. It's really about what actions are going to be taken in the days and the weeks ahead to actually make sure that stability and security is returned to, and peace is returned to the Middle East. And you've got a series of a widespread set of conflicts within the region now. Whether it's what we're seeing in Gaza with Israeli occupation there, what we're seeing with Hamas not refusing to release hostages, now what we're seeing with respect to Israel and Iran. And again, the only more military action is not the answer. The right answer is actually a political solution through diplomacy and dialogue.
And is that achieving the outcome that New Zealand would like to see? I mean, is it incumbent on the US to achieve that, Iran, or both?
Well, I think it's actually the regional actors that are in the region, and they've got a very big stake and are very invested in having a stable region. It's up to those regional players to do that.
You wouldn't want to see the US continuing military action?
Well, again, I think the real opportunity is for diplomacy and dialogue. More military action is not going to create more stability in the region. At some point now, all parties need to come to the table and actually have a conversation and find a pathway through it.
You've said you don't want a nuclear-armed Iran. Does the strike against Iran now actually help achieve that goal?
Well, I think it's just about focusing on the future and what comes next, because in the days and weeks ahead, what happens next is really important. And that is now an opportunity for the parties to come together and have a discussion about how peace can be achieved in the Middle East. That's what we wish for. Yeah.
So are we supporting the United States with this action or not?
Well, again, we weren't involved in this action. We're a long way away from this action. All I've been articulating consistently is, look, we don't think Israel occupying the Gaza, we don't think Hamas holding hostages, and we don't think Iran holding a nuclear weapon and meddling in regional affairs is helpful either. But now where we are, given all the conflict that we're seeing and all the devastation and the human suffering that's taking place, it's really important that actually a long-term political solution is put in place so that we can actually get peace in the region, and that requires parties to have dialogue and diplomacy in place.
Will you be having those talks this week, or is anything going on at the moment with like the Foreign Minister to share our message? I know it's just happened, but so far?
Well, I mean, you've heard us articulate our position strongly. I thought the Foreign Minister articulated the New Zealand position exceptionally well yesterday, as you would expect, and we continue to do so. Frankly, we've been articulating that position from where we sit in New Zealand, and we have to acknowledge we are a long way from this conflict, and it doesn't directly impact New Zealand. But we think that is the right pathway forward, is to have more dialogue, more diplomacy, so that we can get a political solution in place. Military action won't deliver that.
Have New Zealand officials received any clarity from the US about any further plans to take military action?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Is there dialogue occurring? Are we seeking answers about what's happening?
Not that I'm aware of. It's just literally happened this morning, obviously, and it's pretty fresh and new news. But again, we weren't involved. We weren't engaged in the conversation prior to the strikes either.
These conflicts obviously taking place, and we're not a NATO member, but is there already thoughts on like potential theories here of what could happen and the role New Zealand would play?
Well, I mean, if you take Ukraine, New Zealand's always had a very strong peacekeeping presence in a number of theatres and hotspots around the world, and will continue to do that. You've seen us even over the last 18 months actually commit New Zealand Defence Force men and women into some of those peacekeeping missions, and we'll continue to do so. That's why I have so much pride in the NZDF. I think our servicemen and women are incredible people, and I get a great privilege to meet with them on a regular basis and spend time with them privately and individually as I'm passing through their bases and talking to them. But we'll continue to play any role that's needed around peacekeeping, obviously, and we obviously look at each case on its merits. With respect to Ukraine, we believe an immediate ceasefire is necessary. Russia started this illegal war. They can stop it immediately. They could start a 31-day ceasefire, immediate ceasefire tomorrow, and then that's an opportunity then to get to negotiations and a discussion and dialogue and diplomacy there too.
If Iran, was to strike back at these US military bases, would New Zealand support peacekeeping with that?
Well, again, I'm just not going to go into any future scenarios, given all we can call for at the moment from where we sit in the world, as a small country, a long way away from this theatre of conflict, is to say, the answer has to be a negotiated political solution ultimately to get the peace, a long-standing and peace in place. More military action doesn't get you there.
That is in our economic interest too, right, to have that peace. Being here for these NATO talks, is that good for our country's security and economic ties? Yeah,
I think that's the point that I've been trying to make to New Zealanders over the last 18 months, is that these conflicts actually end up affecting global prosperity. You actually can't have economic prosperity without defence security in the world, and actually you've seen that. The Ukraine crisis, where you have a North Korea providing munitions and troops to Russia to fight an illegal war in Ukraine, and the consequences of the Ukraine conflict has led to high energy prices in Western Europe and high rice prices throughout Southeast Asia and grain prices throughout Africa. And that's caused huge pain and suffering for economically for people who have put them into a very difficult situation. So in 2025, you can't have prosperity without security. The two are inextricably linked, and that's the reason, and that's why that's the points that I've been making when I've been here in different global forum and NATO last year and again this year as well.
If this war between Iran and Israel and now the US is to further escalate, do you expect New Zealand to bear any costs as a result, economic costs,
Look, I mean, we've got very little trade, as you know, into the Middle East in general. We obviously have more trade with respect to the UAE, the GCC, but with respect to Israel and Iran, very, very small footprints in those markets economically. So for us, it's all too premature. I mean, we'll see some shocks, as you're seeing, probably around oil prices, and there's a bunch of things that could happen in that regard. But it's all a bit too speculative, all a bit too soon. We'll deal with the issues as they arise. But what we can do right now politically is call for dialogue and diplomacy.
Do you expect those shocks, including any shocks around oil prices, to be relatively short-lived?
Again, it depends on what happens next, and that's why I'm saying ultimately the answer is to get round the table, as difficult as it will be, to have a debate, discussion, dialogue, to negotiate a political solution here, because the consequences of ongoing conflict in the Middle East, the consequences of conflict in Ukraine is devastating.
Given New Zealand is one of the countries that has a embassy in Tehran, acknowledging that I think the staff have left it.
Yes, I was very proud of our MFAT team. I think we did a great job making sure that those staff were protected. For New Zealanders in the region, I just wanted to add is that we've obviously had a long-standing do not travel to Iran advisory out for some time. We've obviously had a set of travel advice for the broader Middle East as well. We would encourage any Kiwis in the region to leave safely if it is safe to do so. Otherwise, follow the advice that they are receiving locally from the authorities in country. Obviously, to register with Safe Travel so that we are aware of if there's any support that we can offer at a consular level. And as you heard from Minister Peters and Minister Collins yesterday, we're looking to position a Hercules into the Middle East, but again acknowledging that will take some time, and there's also some challenges around restricted airspace now as well.
Where would it be based at?
Again, that'll be a decision for Defence, and we won't talk about the details of that. But suffice to say, you're having one positioned in the Middle East gives us some optionality down the road if need be. But I also have to acknowledge it'll take some time, I imagine, to get it there, and restrictions on airspace make it very difficult to.
Just to be clear, optionality being you could fly it into State Israel to help repatriate citizens.
Well, again, that'll be a decision for the Minister of Foreign Affairs to make, and with the Ministry of Defence. Right. But we just want to have an asset positioned in the broader region in general. Anyway, we just think it's smart to do so.
And given we have an ambassador to Iran, which is actually not commonplace amongst many Western nations, does that mean that there could be a role for New Zealand to play in getting the parties to the table?
Look, I think that's it's really going to be the regional actors that have a huge investment at play. As you know, there's a series of dynamics within the Middle East between other countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE,
but we might have
others.
Some cachet with the US, given that they're a security partner of sorts.
Yeah, I'll just say I think there are regional actors and players that are better positioned than New Zealand to be central to those conversations. We've got a very limited consular support in the embassy there. Obviously, that'll be closed for some time, and really it's up to the regional players to really come together and start that process of conversation, which which we'd love to see put back in place.
Just to bring it back to today, was this your first time at the site earlier?
It actually was my first time here. I've obviously read a lot about it. I've loved military history from when I was a little boy, and so I've read a lot about these battles here. I was quite struck at actually how close the different Passandale is from Messines and from Ypres. So it's been really good to actually physically sight it and see it and understand what actually happened here. It looks so peaceful now, doesn't it, as you look out over these lovely hills, rolling hills and very flat farmland, and to think, and when you see actually the photos from that period of 1917, and you think what happened in that October month in particular, but just the absolute devastation. It looks like the surface of the moon, and total destruction. And so, the town that we were in last night, Ypres, has been rebuilt as a medieval village. It was rebuilt after World War I in that way. And so, so it's quite surreal to be here.
And were you able to thank Belgians, like the fact that they continued to really honour our commitment along with other countries?
I've been so impressed by the Belgians here. They every 8 o'clock they do the last post and they do the wreath laying every day, and they have done since 1928. And a new generation has continued that tradition and carried that on. So I've had huge opportunities to meet with the different village mayors along the way. I've met with a lot of volunteers, and as I walked out of the Men in Bridge commemoration last night, I got to drop in on a couple of pubs on the way through and thank some of the retired veterans, for Belgian veterans that were there, that were marching there last night as well. So I've been super impressed that this legacy has been kept alive. It's been interesting. I've spoken to a number of school children that have been here, travelling in from the UK, for example, on tours through this region and understanding the history here, and they've each been given a soldier to research, and they're understanding it now as 12-year-olds as to what happened here and what are the lessons from World War I. Great, awesome team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.